In 2007, a technology executive stood in front of the World Economic Forum in Davos and described a plan to make gasoline obsolete within a decade. He had no car company, no battery factory, and no network of any kind. What he had was $1 billion of committed investment, the backing of the Israeli government, and a model that every serious analyst said was either the future of transportation or a catastrophic misreading of how markets actually work. Within 6 years, the company was bankrupt. The question is not simply what went wrong. The question is why a venture that attracted serious money, serious governments, and serious engineering talent collapsed before a single meaningful market reached scale. Shai Agassi had been a senior executive at SAP, one of the world's largest enterprise software companies, when he began developing the idea that would become Better Place. The problem he identified was genuine. Personal transportation in the mid-2000s was overwhelmingly dependent on oil, and that dependence carried real costs in price volatility, geopolitical exposure, and carbon emissions. Electric vehicles existed, but they faced two obstacles that had defeated every previous attempt to bring them to mass market: range anxiety and the high upfront cost of battery packs. Agassi's proposed solution was structural rather than technological. Instead of selling drivers a car with an expensive battery built in, Better Place would own the batteries and sell access to energy the same way a mobile phone network sells access to calls. Drivers would pay a subscription. The company would build the infrastructure. The model had a real logic to it. Battery packs in the late 2000s cost tens of thousands of dollars, and that cost was the single largest reason electric vehicles remained a niche product. If the battery could be removed from the purchase price of the car and treated instead as a service asset, the vehicle itself became competitive with a conventional gasoline alternative. Better Place would build two types of infrastructure: charging stations for everyday use and battery swap stations where a depleted pack could be exchanged for a fully charged one in roughly the same time it took to fill a tank with gasoline. The swap station concept was the engineering centerpiece of the entire venture. It was also, as it turned out, one of the structural vulnerabilities that the company could never fully escape. Between 2007 and 2010, Better Place raised approximately $850 million, making it one of the most heavily funded clean technology ventures of its era. Israel became the primary launch market, chosen because it was geographically compact, had a government willing to provide tax incentives for electric vehicles, and was symbolically meaningful to Agassi, who framed energy independence as a national security issue for a country entirely surrounded by oil-producing neighbors. Denmark was selected as a second launch market for similar structural reasons: small geography, high fuel taxes, and a government with stated renewable energy targets. Renault agreed to manufacture a purpose-built electric vehicle, the Fluence Z.E, designed specifically to accommodate the battery swap system. This was a significant commercial commitment. It was also a constraint that would matter enormously later. By 2011 and into 2012, Better Place had physical infrastructure operating in Israel. It had opened battery swap stations, deployed a network of charging points, and begun delivering cars to customers. The company was covered extensively and admiringly by technology and business press. Agassi appeared on lists of the world's most influential thinkers. The venture was treated in many quarters not as a startup taking a risk, but as a company executing an inevitable transition. That framing was itself a warning sign, though it was not widely read as one at the time. The gap between the vision and the operational reality was already wide. The structural weakness was not hidden in the financial statements alone. It was embedded in the architecture of the business model. Battery swap required that every participating vehicle be built to a common physical standard so that the pack could be removed and replaced mechanically in minutes. That meant Better Place needed not just one willing automaker, but eventually many, all committing to the same design specification. Renault was the only major manufacturer to make that commitment. Every other automaker that Better Place approached declined, which meant the entire network was built around a single vehicle model sold in limited volumes. A network whose value grows with the number of users had almost no users. The swap stations that cost millions of dollars each to build were processing a handful of battery exchanges per day. Under that pressure, the company made decisions that compounded the structural problem rather than addressing it. Infrastructure was built ahead of demand on the assumption that scale would follow. The Israel network was expanded, and the Denmark operation was developed in parallel, dividing capital and management attention across two markets that were each too small on their own to generate the transaction volume the financial model required. Leadership changes added operational disruption. Agassi departed as chief executive in late 2012 as losses mounted and investor patience contracted. The company burned through capital at a rate that the subscription revenue from a few thousand vehicles could not come close to covering. The competitive landscape was also shifting in a direction that undermined the core premise. Tesla had demonstrated with the Model S that a premium electric vehicle with a large battery pack and a conventional charging approach could generate genuine consumer demand without requiring infrastructure partnerships or battery swapping. Fast charging technology was advancing. While swap stations could exchange a battery in minutes, fast chargers were beginning to close the time gap in ways that didn't require a standardized removable pack or a network of expensive mechanical facilities. The specific problem Better Place had been designed to solve was being approached from a different angle by competitors who had not accepted the swap station premise. In May 2013, Better Place filed for bankruptcy in Israel. The company had sold approximately 1,400 vehicles in Israel and a much smaller number in Denmark. Against the roughly $850 million raised, the operational footprint at the time of failure was a few hundred charging stations, a small number of swap facilities, and a customer base too small to sustain a city bus network, let alone an international infrastructure company. The assets were sold. The swap stations were decommissioned. Renault discontinued the swap-compatible version of the Fluence. For the customers who had purchased vehicles and subscriptions in Israel, the bankruptcy created an immediate practical problem. The cars required the Better Place network to manage battery access. When the network went dark, those vehicles lost significant functionality. The human cost was real and specific. Ordinary consumers who had trusted the model and made a purchasing decision on that basis were left with a product that no longer worked as sold. That consequence is worth holding alongside the investment figures because it defines what infrastructure failure actually means at the individual level. The Better Place story is frequently reduced to a single lesson about a visionary founder who moved too fast, or alternatively, to a lesson about the difficulty of building infrastructure businesses. Both readings miss the more precise mechanism. Better Place made a bet that the specific problem of battery cost and range anxiety would not be solved any other way. That bet required every major automaker to adopt a common removable battery standard, which required convincing competitors to cooperate on the physical architecture of their core product. When that coordination failed to materialize, the entire value proposition collapsed because the network effect that justified the infrastructure investment never had enough nodes to generate the returns the model required. The electric vehicle transition that Better Place predicted did eventually happen, but it happened through declining battery costs, improved energy density, and fast-charging networks, none of which required a removable standard or a subscription infrastructure company sitting between the driver and the energy. The future arrived. Better Place had simply built the wrong road to it.